There we go. So you're being recorded. So welcome everybody to our CRT England Masterclass. We're delighted to have John Hancox here tonight from Scottish Heritage Fruit. I'm going to introduce John in a wee while, but before we do that, we wondered maybe if you wanted just for 2 minutes just to say hello, who you are, where you're from, and that would probably be helpful for John as well tonight. So just a quick hello, how am I doing, my project, your name, that would be helpful. So I'm going to nominate Anne-Marie to start.
Hi everyone, I'm Anne-Marie from Cordons Community Meadow. We're doing all right. We're just talking about the sunflowers there, and our volunteers are reporting 8'6" on the sunflowers. We also had a wee bit of a potato harvest yesterday, so it's the first out of what is our community space, on top of some green beans and stuff over the summer, which was lovely to see. We're not quite there as in growing as yet, but this was just small starting points, and it was nice to see it come straight from the garden straight to someone's dinner plate, and thoroughly enjoyed. It was lovely. So yeah, we're doing okay. We've got a wee visit tomorrow from our local MP, who's wanting to come along and start interacting with us. So we're almost 2 years down the line, so it's nice for them to raise their head above the pulpit. I think they might be canvassing for some votes, but we'll see how that goes when he comes along. But it'd be nice just for him to at least acknowledge that the community exists.
Okay, someone else? Phil, can I nominate you?
That's better. I think you can hear me now. Yeah, things going well at the garden in Mayfield. Things are really blossoming now. So to think we only built the raised beds in March, and we thought we were going to just be playing catch up. So we thought if we get them built and if we could grow anything, we can harvest anything, it'd be a bonus this year. But it's doing really well. A real gut on beetroot, some excellent beetroot. Sweet corn is growing really nicely in the corner. And squashes. So we're amazed. We're absolutely amazed, and the volunteers are amazed that in such a short space of time. But it's a big, expansive space as well. So it's been a lot of work to get things up and going, and we've been getting a community hub building, which is at the side of it, getting that up and going as well. So it's a hell of a lot of work in the last few months, but it's with the volunteers, it's coming on well. And I sent a short little video to Jean and Enid earlier, just a little snippet was filmed last week, so it was nice to see that as well. Yeah. So yeah, okay, and the school's starting next week. They're coming in next week, so we're hoping to try and look at the potentially move with the Glen Award.
Brilliant, Phil. That's good to hear, and lovely wee video from Phil, and we would like to circulate it through the group, so we'll make sure that everybody gets to see that wonderful video. Thanks, Phil. Robert, do you want to go next?
I'm Robert Mckenzie. I'm here in High Valleyfield. I'm the kind of the spokesperson between Fife Council and the allotment holders. Not just the allotment holders, but other volunteers that's been coming along and helping us out. We've got paths created by what used to be the miners' club. It's now owned by the community. We've got paths, we've got wee ponds, we've got fruit trees, and again, everything is blossoming and harvesting some potatoes and different things, and it's coming on greatly. We're just looking forward to the oven for making the pizzas, which hopefully will be here pretty soon. We also made the paths from potholes, believe it or not, and it was the planings off the road. When they dug out the pothole, we asked the council if we could take them, and they actually delivered them to the back of the club. And Enid has been out and seen the allotments, and she's also seen our club is now up and running again. With a bit of disaster a couple of years ago, but it's now up and running, so it's looking good.
Thank you, Robert. Great catch up there. Thanks. Sounds as though it's a productive space you've got there. Looking forward to seeing it hopefully soon. Pamela, do you want to go next?
So I'm Pamela from Grow West Fife, which is a community vegetable growing place in the walled garden at Blair Castle, which we started last year in lockdown as just a way of growing lots of food to give away. And so we've carried on this year with sort of tweaking what we do, and we've now got some fixed volunteer sessions, and everything's looking amazing at the moment. Everything's in full flow, isn't it? Except for my sunflowers, which I'm convinced that Enid must have given me the dwarf variety of seed, because they're still like this. So yeah, I won't be winning any competitions with CRT this year. I might get comedy sunflowers award. Oh dear. Anyway.
Pamela, you could go for the Creative Photograph Award.
Yeah, I might have. Yeah, that's probably my only hope. We've grown so many as well that it's a crying shame. But anyway, other things are growing quite well.
Thanks, Pamela. Ed, do you want to go next?
I feel I'm in the wrong place. I'm just sort of soundboarding your ideas. I come from Glenrothes and Fife. I'm part of a young onset group, dementia group, and they do volunteering in various places, Kenway Shed and the Ecology Centre at Kinghorn. So, like I say, I'm no gardener really, but you're going to talk about trees, I believe. So, at the Ecology Centre, I personally put in the polytunnel a kiwi fruit tree and an avocado tree.
Ooh.
And they're growing. So, like I say, we're just trying to keep the actual stand group going with various things. Like yesterday, we were doing outdoor fitness sessions, that kind of thing. So, if there's any, forgot about the beetroot. Next Monday, we're going to pickle all our crop of beetroot. They tell me they're going to put me on camera, but I think I'll just miss that one.
Thanks, Ed. That's great, and thanks for telling us all about Stand. We get lots of people that are part of Stand joining this session, so you're more than welcome. And you're every gardener is learning something new, so don't feel as though you're out your depth in any way whatsoever. So good to see you tonight, Ed, and I hope you enjoy John's talk. Lee, last but not least, Lee.
Thank you. I don't mind being last. Yeah, it's busy for us. We're in full harvesting mode, but a lot of that is because of the volunteers, especially from Stand and the help I have from Ed, who's a little bit more physically active, and he's most definitely saved the avocados. So we've had hundreds of broad beans, beetroots, potatoes, onions are ready to be strung up. And we've got so many tomatoes in the polytunnel that we're struggling to use them. You can take some tomatoes home, Ed, but yeah, it's testament to what you can do, and the Glenawald has really focused a lot of the sessions that we do with people living with dementia. So it's been great to be able to educate, and Fraser, our educator, doing the composting and the whole route to everything. It's been a really nice focus for people to take knowledge away.
That's great, Lee. Thanks so much. Lovely to hear that feedback. Thanks very much, folks, for introducing yourself. So Now I'd like to just move on and welcome John. The format of the session is like most of our other masterclass sessions. I'll do a quick intro in terms of John, and then John's going to do a PowerPoint presentation just to talk about his work with Scottish heritage fruit trees. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity just to ask John a few questions, anything related to fruit that you want to find out. So we've got about 3/4 of an hour. If we run a wee bit over, hopefully that won't be too much for anybody. Hope you're not having to dash off, but I think we should be on track. So just to introduce John, welcome John. John Hancox from Scottish Heritage Fruit Trees. Did a wee bit of research on John. So John's basically a specialist fruit tree supplier. Scottish Heritage Fruit Trees is a social enterprise that support the planting of school and community orchards and preserve old and rare varieties, as well as planting the orchards of the future. John wants to give people inspiration to plant trees and the skills to look after them. By buying a tree from Scottish Heritage Fruit Trees, you're supporting this work. So John's mission is to create a fruitful Scotland. He's been working for the past 15 years in schools, community groups and charities, housing associations, councils, farmers, foresters, and helping to create a fruitful Scotland, as I say, a whole Scotland-wide really. So John has helped to start up many Apple Day events as well and supplied fruit trees to many. The work of Scottish Heritage Fruit Trees is very much focused around all the old heritage varieties. So John's been very fortunate to have inherited budwood from quite a famous nurseryman in Ayrshire called John Butterworth, and also some of the heritage varieties from the National Trust of Scotland as well. So if you're looking for fruit that's really historic to Scotland and something a wee bit unique, John can supply that for you. A wee bit about John himself. I've been digging about and I discovered, I didn't know this, John, that in a previous life you were a journalist. He worked for various newspapers, The Guardian, The Herald, The Scotsman, Telegraph, Sunday Times and The Observer, and wrote about food policy, farming and environmental issues. John's interest in fruit dates back to early childhood, remembering the magic of picking ripe fruit and eating it straight from the tree. The first apple tree John planted was paid for by a wee diary piece in the Sunday Times. He asked a council parks department why they didn't plant fruit trees in the park, and he got the answer: people would eat the fruit. John doesn't get much time to write now, but he has planted thousands of fruit trees in parks across Scotland, as well as in gardens, schools, nurseries, and just about everywhere else. So a very warm welcome to John. I'm going to hand over to John now, and I'll look forward to hearing all about your work, John.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. So I will share my screen, hopefully, put the presentation on. Help. Am I doing this? Isn't technology wonderful? We did master this. Can you see the right bit now?
So that looks promising, John.
Good. All right. There we go. So you can see that? Okay.
Yep.
So basically, I've put in quite a lot of photographs and things. This is my website and details, but I'll come back to that. A picture of me juggling apples. That is actually up in the Clyde Valley. I'm based in Glasgow, but I've been involved with orchards right across Scotland. And I mean, somebody mentioned High Valley Field, and I think a number of years ago I went and did some work in, I think, a kind of allotments there, and I've worked a lot with just different places across Fife and sort of across central Scotland. So what Scottish Fruit Trees does then is that we help people plan and plant orchards. We supply fruit trees to gardeners, and especially the old Scottish heritage varieties, but also mainstream varieties that do well in Scotland. So I'm not hugely a purist about having to use heritage varieties, but I think it's really important that people pay attention to what variety they plant, because it's the most crucial thing about whether you actually get a successful outcome or not. If you plant the wrong trees, the wrong varieties, you're storing up problems. You're much more likely to get disease and problems with them. So I think the choice of varieties and having suitable varieties for the location is probably the most important take-home message from today. We work with schools and community groups, planting fruit trees, and that can be a small scale or large scale. We've worked with farmers, with estates. I'm very fond of walled gardens. They're lovely, lovely things. Quite a lot of apple days, and also making juice and also cider with excess fruit. So at this time of year, I do a call out for excess apples from gardens and things, and we get those together and get them juiced and used. So, and we've somebody from Shetland sent me some photographs earlier this week that her trees up in Shetland, which is growing outside, actually doing really well this year. So we've basically planted from the Outer Hebrides down to the borders, and from Aberdeenshire down to Galloway and so forth. And this is actually a photograph of a tree that's just outside my house. I'm in Glasgow, and we planted this about 7 years ago. And people stop and have their photographs taken next to it. It's a discovery. It's the variety. It's really pretty, and so you can plant one tree, and it's very valuable. Being increasingly encouraging people to think about planting edible hedges. This is a kind of linear orchard. It's a school in Springburn in Glasgow, and we planted fruit trees around the perimeter fence, and that's worked quite nicely. So these are fruit trees, and they're interplanted with soft fruit. So it makes a nice sort of change from privet and things like that, which, as far as I know, you can't eat. And that's a much larger scale community orchard that was planted in Dunkeld up in Perthshire, which was in 2008. And I've dug out a couple of pictures of how that orchard progressed through the years. So this is the same orchard a few years later. That's 2012. So I guess that's 4 years on, and that's 10 years on. And there's something quite satisfying going back to see an orchard that you planted 10 years ago, and which is now way over your head and producing loads of fruit. That's the fruit that's been gathered from the community orchard at Dunkeld. They're quite organised in their harvesting, and they try and make sure that people know what to harvest at what time. And I think it's again, quite an important point with community orchards is they're not very high maintenance, so we just get on with it, but it's quite handy to have somebody keeping an eye on what's ripe and what isn't ripe, because it's a bit disappointing if people go in and pick stuff that isn't ready. So a bit of management, a bit of thought about how it's managed is needed. But apart from that, it's pretty low maintenance. So this is planting. This is a big orchard in a farm in East Lothian. So the idea of this is that they currently do things like pumpkin patches, and they're looking to have an area of orchard where where families can visit, and where, you know, there's a thing in America where people go out in the autumn and pick apples and enjoy sort of apple days out on farms. So there are a few farmers started to plant for that sort of thing, so that we'll have a, you know, a sort of attraction for families to come out to in the autumn. So that's the plan there. It looks a little bit like the Western Front, but hopefully the trees will grow and push out. But that took us about a week to plant in February, so that was quite nice. That's the squad who were planting it, and yeah, that was an extended family of the farmer, including starting them young. Yeah. I do quite a lot of work with different community groups. This is a project over in Edinburgh. So these trees were actually planted into big planters, and I was asked to go back and advise on pruning and how to care and feed the trees and so forth. So I do quite a lot of workshops with community groups, doing, you know, showing people how to maintain, how to prune, how to feed the trees, you know, as well as, you know, sort of doing apple days and things like that, where you're harvesting and juicing. And I also quite encourage, I'm not actually that great at baking, but I'm very good at judging apple pie competitions. It seems to be a perk. So there are quite a lot of traditional skills to do with orchard management, which are quite fun. I got fed up with strimmers, and strimmers are absolute menace around fruit trees. So I've started using a scythe, which is quite a nice way of doing it. It's A, a good workout, and B, the noise is, you know, it's very quiet, but it's a nice action, and it's a nice noise, scything grass, and it doesn't damage the trees nearly as much. So I recommend scything. There's a whole range of traditional skills that go with orchards that we try and encourage people to learn. So this was an apple day, actually at Elco Castle, which is again in Perthshire. It's and this is so we get together in the autumn, lots of different varieties, and make a display of the different varieties. So there are something like 40 specifically Scottish varieties. So we've got things like Bloody Ploughman, Lass of Gowrie from Perthshire. We've got Canvas Neth and Maggie Sinclair, Tam Montgomery from the Clyde Valley, James Grieve, Cutler Grieve from Edinburgh, East Lothian Pippin, Arbroath Pippin. So all the different areas have old varieties that have kind of thrived in those environments. Galloway Pippin, there's one called Cool Blush, which is a Rothshire apple. So it's kind of nice to see them. One of the problems is that people always are desperate to taste the different apples. So I have to put signs up on the table when I do this, asking people not to eat the apples, because it's a display rather than, so we occasionally have bites out of the bottom of the apples, which is a bit annoying when you go on to the next place. And we work a lot with young people. So this is a juicer. Again, I think one of the nice things about working with young people and fruit trees is that they really get it. It's very kind of Wallace and Gromit with this style of press. You kind of mash up the apples and squeeze it. You turn the handle around, and the juice comes out, and it's very sort of, it's very direct, very obvious what's happening, and the kids love it. And I seem to have, why am I not going on to the next slide? It's interesting. Why am I not going on to the next slide? Sorry about this, folks.
So just paused, John.
I don't know what's happened. Let's try that. Plug my. It's kind of frozen. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah. So just another picture of guys, of kids, making juice. So I think again, one of the really nice things about fruit is, well, it's very visual. We're primates, and we're kind of tuned into the kind of colours of fruit, and attracted by it. And it's a nice thing to do in the autumn when, autumn can be a slightly sad time where things are starting to die back, and fruits are kind of a nice compensation for that. I think it's a nice thing to do. It's a variety called Katie, which is a very pretty apple. That's the apple rather than the girl. I make a cider called Clyde cider, which is basically we get surplus garden fruit and mash it up and ferment it, and that's what that is. He's not drinking cider, he's drinking apple juice. But the apple juice, so I'm not sure how many of you will have seen one of these wee presses, but the apple juice that comes out, it's amazing. It tastes absolutely fantastic. And again, it's a nice thing to do. And as I say, I think we're very tuned into the colours and tastes. So this is a recent photograph. I've just been picking the first lot of plums and the very early apples. So the apples there are Beauty of Bath, which are a very early variety, and the plums are called Early Rivers, which are a really delicious kind of early purple plum, and they're lovely things. That's my dog, who fortunately likes apples. I can actually train him with apples. He doesn't like cider, but he likes apples. This is working up in North Glasgow. So there's a person called Angela who's looked after this orchard up in Milton, which is, and this is the local school, came out for an apple day. And somebody was very pleased with an enormous apple. That's in the Borders. That was Triquare House. That's planting a tree in Clydebank, I think that is. But again, what's nice about it is the kids get an enormous sense of satisfaction by actually planting the tree and seeing it grow. And there's something quite strange when you go back to a school a few years later, which I have done. And again, the trees that were planted by kids that sort of size are, you know, are sort of starting to mature and look like they've been there forever. I sometimes tell the kids that they'll be bringing their children back to pick the fruit, and they look a bit worried. But again, one of the really good things about planting fruit trees, I mean, it's particularly with schools, but it's also relevant to some extent with community groups, community orchards, is it does fit very well with the school year. You get blossom, you basically plant most trees, fruit trees, over the winter. You get blossom in spring, and you get to harvest the fruit in the autumn. A lot of the difficulties that school gardens have is that the summer holidays come when all the veg are ready, and that's hard to manage. So fruit trees are very good for that. They fit well with the school year. They're also pretty low maintenance, which is kind of important for schools. Oh, no, I don't seem to have it. Come on, you can do it. Let's not scroll. You love technology. Oh, we do an Apple Day at the Scottish Parliament. Well, we did do most years. This year, I think we're probably going to struggle, and last year it was cancelled. But it's funny how popular the Apple Day is with MSPs, because they get to be photographed with the kids next to an apple tree or holding an apple, which is sort of a good thing. Somebody in the intro mentioned the MP coming along, and I think community gardens and community orchards and so forth are terrific in terms of, you know, their appeal to people, you know, of all sorts. They look great in photographs. James Grieve is a famous Edinburgh apple, and he's also, this is a portrait of the man who generated it. And help, come on, you can do it. Why am I not? Yeah. It's just as well this isn't stand up, the delivery wouldn't be.
Is it just frozen, John?
Yep.
Yeah. If it doesn't work, I've got your presentation on my laptop. I could change it over.
Yeah. Well, let's see if get one more minute. Well, it has frozen a couple of times. If you don't mind, can you pull it up? I think you've got it as a PDF, so it should run. Yeah.
Do you want to stop sharing your screen, and I'll...
Yeah, I'll try to. Sure if I got it. How do I do this?
Hang on, I think I've got it here. I can do it here, John.
Can you?
Yeah.
Good.
Right.
Okay.
Oh, hang on. Right. Okay. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's James Grieve. Next slide, please. That's the apple on the left, and that's these Victorian tags that you get in old gardens are things of beauty, and that's another. Next slide. So again, there's a very long history of growing fruit in Scotland, going back to the sort of establishment of monasteries and cathedrals and so forth in Scotland. So things like Oslin or Arbroath Pippin was introduced by the monks at the abbey there. And there's a history of, for instance, an area in Glasgow, the Merchant City, was planted on the site of a former pear orchard. So there's an awful lot of history to fruit growing in Scotland that's a bit surprising. And that's an old woodcut on the right-hand side of the screen. And you can see a sort of fairly similar kind of apple that was on a wall, which is in Angus. So it's a house where we planted some trees, which I'm actually going to tomorrow. Next slide, please. And you can do all sorts of fancy things in terms of training fruit trees. The left-hand side is cordons. So you can put trees on either walls or on fences and sort of slap them in, a bit like a louvered blind. You can plant them really tightly together and again create a sort of linear orchard. And the picture to the right, that's an apple walk. It's a kind of tunnel with fruit growing over the top of it, which is a thing of real beauty. So next slide, please. This is sort of, I do quite a lot of both pruning for people, but also pruning workshops. And occasionally I try and tell people to use proper ladders rather than standing on shed roofs, which sort of seem to work, but he's a bit lighter than me, that guy. So next slide, please. Again, this is the apple juice. That's discovery that we juiced, which makes an amazing colour juice. Next slide, please. And we do quite a lot to promote Scottish fruit. So that was at the BBC Food Show. We've been to things like Gardening Scotland and lots of other events. I'm quite happy, with certainly this year, seeing I couldn't get out and do any of the Apple Day events this year. I'm quite keen to get out and do some Apple Days again this year and do some of the fun stuff of getting out and talking to people and promoting fruit growing and getting people interested. So next slide, please. And so I put this slide in partly for fun, but also the apple waste and so forth. Actually, we get, what's interesting about growing fruit is nothing gets wasted, really. You can use the best quality stuff for eating and cooking, and the second quality stuff can get juiced, and then what's left from that makes pigs very happy. This is a sort of rare breed pig, and Hannah, the pig lady, came along to get it for her pigs. So next slide, please. This isn't in Scotland, but that's, I like the picture. Next slide. Yeah, fruit growing, I think it's part of the, there's a lot of interest now in sustainability and carbon reduction and so forth, and that's going to become, I think, a bigger thing over the next while. And growing fruit trees, I think, has most of the advantages of growing any kind of trees. You're reducing food miles, you're growing food in Scotland rather than bringing it in from Chile or from, all sorts of other places, and bringing in apples from America and so forth is a bit bonkers when they grow quite happily outside your house. So I think the whole environmental issue about growing fruit and growing trees generally is very important, and it makes good habitat for insects and so on. And next slide, please. Yeah, this is a newly planted orchard in Kinross, and we interplanted the trees with wildflower mix, and that's been very successful and both very pretty, but it's also completely covered in insects of all kinds of, yeah. Next slide, please. And this is plum blossom, and fruit trees, I think, are, they are very attractive in blossom, and they also, well, to my mind, they're attractive with the fruit on them as well. So I think they deserve a place in gardens. Next slide, please. This is good. This is your chance to say something. So when's the best time to plant an apple tree? Anybody? I'll shout at once.
Winter.
Yep, that's a good time. Any other thoughts?
Anytime.
It's a good thought. Any other thoughts?
Anytime, as long as it's in a container.
We can argue about that later. Next
All
slide,
right.
please. Yeah. And the answer is that it's 20 years ago. But the next best time is now. So yeah. Next slide, please. So just a recap on what we do. We're involved with planning and planting orchards, supplying trees, working with schools and community groups, doing various things, developing orchards, running apple days, training people, working with farmers and estates to develop orchards, apple days, celebrating the harvest, and making use of the fruit subsequently. What I haven't actually got on there as well is I am quite keen eventually to actually create a bit of a market for Scottish fruit, and that will, I think, happen. It's taken a long time to get to the point where we are now, but people are starting to grow fruit again in Scotland on a reasonable scale, and I think there will be an emerging market for Scottish fruit. Next slide, please. And why we do it? Well, hopefully you've got some of the points already, but community orchards are a great way of bringing people together. Don't want to talk down things like allotments, but allotments tend to be people working on their own bit of ground, whereas community orchards are definitely a kind of common ground. We're keen on the old varieties. In terms of other things, it would be nice to see, people getting involved with orchards, because I think it's a worthwhile, sustainable living that you can make with it, and to some extent I've managed to do that, keeping traditional skills going, and also that the trees are good for the environment and rather cheesily are a good present for the future. And next slide, please. And questions. So yeah, that's me. So I don't know whether anyone has anything they want to ask. Yeah.
I do. We, in our walled garden, we've inherited a lot of apple trees. We don't really, well, we don't know at all what they are. Some of them have been, they look like they've been espaliered, but then left to not espalier. So some of them are a bit of a funny shape, but they're pretty productive. And there was one tree last year that was, had huge amounts of apples on it. I got lots and lots of harvest. And then I decided that I would do my first ever pruning of an apple tree with a bit of help from my sister, who is a gardener. And this year we've got nothing. We had about 3 flowers and we've got 1 apple on it. Are they sometimes biennial?
Yes, they are. It depends on varieties, but fruit trees generally, if you have a very heavy crop one year, they'll quite often have a rest the next year. And it's also been a funny year, so it's possible that it wasn't that, but it may have been late frosts or something like that. But things like Victoria plums are very prone to biannuality. You either get not very much at all, or you get too much, and you can end up with broken branches. And the advice, which is slightly hard to take in some ways, is to actually thin out heavily. If you've got bumper crops one year, you should really thin out so the tree doesn't get overstressed. So it's a bit like somebody having, I don't know, octuplets or something. So likely to put them off having children the next year. It's a sort of the tree has to recover somewhere. But it's also to do with varieties. Some varieties are quite prone to biannuality.
Yeah, we've no idea what any of the varieties are, actually. So.
Well, it's yeah. It's a very common problem. Lots of people, when they plant orchards, don't label them terribly well, and it can be a bit frustrating that people don't have proper plans. We've
got nothing, no records or anything of the fruit trees. It's a shame.
Yeah, it may be possible to. Again, what people quite often do when we have apple days is they come along with their apples and try and match them up. So it's not completely impossible to track it down. And if you're keen enough and you have the budget, you can get you can actually run PCR tests and work out genetically what things are. But it's a bit of an expensive undertaking. But it's probably possible. Where are you based? Where was your?
Just outside, between Cordons and Kincardine, at Blair Castle.
Yeah. Well, sounds not promising to come, but it's one of these ones. It's what I should really do on the website is have a kind of gallery so that people can try and. I did have an attempt at it, but it's kind of fallen off the back of the. The
other thing I was just going to quickly ask was whether you recommended any books on the history of Scottish fruit. Just because my family are from Arbroath, so I was really interested.
I am trying to write the very book at the moment.
Oh, good.
Very slowly.
It's
yeah. Yeah. The answer is watch this space.
Oh, good. That was the right answer.
But I need to get it done. But no, there isn't really a book that kind of. It's funny because there's an Irish book of Irish apples, and there's a Welsh book of Welsh apples, and there's a big gap in the market for a book of Scottish apples. So, yeah. So there we go. Slightly niche. I don't think it's going to go to the bestseller list, but
you never know.
Slightly niche. But yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Maggie, just to come in. Yeah. Hi, John. I'm absolutely delighted that you're here this evening. We at Cordon Community Meadow have been following your work for quite some time. I did speak to you on the telephone late one evening at the beginning of summer. We were hoping to manage to get you along during the summer as we had ideas of planting a living hedge, and it was lovely to see it in your images there tonight. Even better was the farmland that had all those beautiful fruit trees planted in it. We're fighting to save some precious green space in our community, and that is the vision. Just the images that you see there, it was old farmland, and what a delight it would be to have that full of beautiful fruit trees, and seeing the juice in there as well with the kids. That's something that we do in the community with our kids when we have activities and things going on, and they absolutely relish in it. They love it, and it's sunshine in a glass, as we describe it. Both Enid and Jean have had the privilege of trying some of your fantastic juices, and we would love to be growing our own produce, to be able to readily have that available for our community. And yeah, just we've got visions of everything that you're showing there this evening, and it's lovely to actually hear you here tonight. And definitely we'll be in touch because we want to get living hedges going soon.
I'd love to see it. So yeah. It's one of these things. Planting orchards isn't exactly a quick process. It's not like fireworks. But if you kind of plug away at it, it is very satisfying. It's a nice thing to do, and it's interesting how, to some extent, the pictures, sort of tell the story itself. It's a nice. You can see that people have fun doing it, and I think it's kind of gone from me and maybe one or two other people, sort of rather solitarily going on about fruit trees sort of 15, 20 years ago, to it being quite a thing now. So it's good. It's very strange being in something that's sort of vaguely fashionable, because it seems to be quite fashionable. Yeah, even science fashionable, which is quite strange.
When you said about when we should plant, and you said 20 years ago, well, we all still intend to be around in 20 years' time. So our time's now, and we want to see that happen soon. And we'll be there to enjoy the fruits of our labour, hopefully.
Yeah, no, it's a good way. Yeah. So, it's good.
Can I give a quick one, John? It was a bit like Pamela. We inherited these trees that were planted in tyres, and because it's an ex-bowling green, we had to use a mini digger to scoop out some holes because it was solid below the surface. So none of these trees were labelled, but we went for it in it because it was probably too much of a mad dash. But we've got them in the ground. they look comfortable. We put some goodness in the ground, but they do look reasonably healthy. We're surprised that they survived the trauma. But hopefully, like Pamela, we'll see some. We are seeing some fruit appearing already, and it's. But it'd be nice to be able to sort of to try and label them, and maybe some photographs, like Pamela send some photographs, and we can sit and we can sort of match them up and sort of. But it's a shame none of them were labelled, but we've gone for it anyway. But
Yeah.
Again, we've let it grow wild around the trees, and we like in the photograph we put some wildflower seeds. So we've wanted as many bees and to enjoy that space of the garden. So hopefully it will help.
No, I mean it's one of these things. To some extent, it doesn't really matter if they're labelled or not. But on the other hand, it's still quite nice to know what variety it is. It's and people are a bit careless, and I've been careless in the past. I've gradually got more and more meticulous about labelling things and trying to make sure that people know what's what. But it's not a particularly easy thing to do, to have permanent labels that stay there, not least with children, because they seem to take a particular delight in untying labels from one tree and sticking it on another. It seems to be a universal joke among children. Yeah. So
thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Ed, did you want to say something?
Yeah, gains, wild gains.
Yeah.
Do you need to prune them? Because I've been picking gains for years, and I'm not sure whether they need to be sort of thinned out or what.
You know, I would say with stone fruit generally, they're happier to be left alone entirely. There's a bit of a difference between things like apples and pears are quite happy to be trained, whereas plums and cherries are really. I make the sort of cat and dog analogy that you can train dogs, but you can't train cats, and you can train apples, but you can't really train plums. So plums.
I beg to differ. My cat can be trained.
I bet. Like a challenge. Come and train out.
About to your superior knowledge and experience on the tree.
Well, you can. I mean, you can. There's no advantage in the only advantage is if you're trying to keep them tidy or keep them. You can fan train plums, or cherries on a wall, but it's an awful lot of faff, and I'm not. And if you don't have to, I wouldn't bother. Yeah.
No, well, I don't.
Yeah. In fact, generally with apples and pears as well, if you don't prune them, they'll sort of not do too badly. The really disastrous thing to do in terms of pruning is to prune when you don't know what you're doing. So you're much better off not doing anything than to. The worst possible thing is to go around it and give a tree a general haircut, and just sort of, go around it and chop bits off and make it all just more compact, because then what you end up with is a kind of a dense ball with absolutely no light and air getting into the middle, and that's totally what you don't want to do. So if you don't know what you're doing, don't do anything. And if you want to learn how to do it, get somebody like, such as myself, but there are other people to come along and, and work on a couple of trees and kind of understand the principle of how to do it. the general principle with fruit trees is you want lots of light and air getting into the middle. And if it gets too congested in the middle, that's when you're going to get molds and, you know, kind of the fruit won't ripen up properly because the light can't get into the middle to ripen it up and so on. And you can't get into the middle to pick it as well. Monty Dawn had this quite nice thing where he said that a bird sitting on one side of the tree should be able to hop across to the other side without getting stuck. And I think that's quite helpful, you know, that you need it, plenty of air and light in the middle of it. So, but no.
John, could I ask about caterpillars on fruit? Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have some more or less dwarf fruit trees planted in planters. And the other day, first that we've noticed, but we had quite, one of them seemed to be sort of overrun with caterpillars. So we're now trying to read up and see what is the best way to deal with this. Do you have any advice?
I mean, are they doing any obvious damage?
Well, apart from some of the leaves being having a good munch on, but you know, the bark and everything seems to be okay.
Yeah. My sort of first, what I usually advise people to do as a first step is to use a kind of soapy water spray, which deters an awful lot of insects, aphids and so on. And I think what happens with the soapy water spray is they basically fall off. I think whatever the mechanism is by which insects stick onto the leaves gets disrupted by the detergent. Either that or they just don't like the taste of it, because, you know, if you think about us and soap in our mouths, we don't like the taste of it. So I would just get a bit of detergent in a squishy, you know, one of those squisher things, and spray those on. And it's surprisingly effective. And it doesn't do the kind of damage to beneficial insects. Caterpillars themselves are not one of the normal pests that we have a huge problem with. There are, there is something that, what's it called, Cuddling Moth, which is something that that affects trees, but it's usually down south. And Dobies sort of sell people these bands to put around the trees that stop the moths climbing up. They're kind of like sticky tape or double-sided tape, and the insects kind of get stuck to that. But usually, I don't think it's necessary in Scotland, because as far as I've never seen Cuddling Moth in Scotland, so I think they just like selling the bands to people because presumably they make money out of it. But I don't think we've got any Cuddling Moths. But I might be wrong. Yeah.
Well, I hope that's not what we've got. I think it was a caterpillar. I hope I'm not wrong there and we've got something else.
Maybe it was a cat. Yeah. It's as I say, with most pests, they sort themselves out. Caterpillars and things like that, quite often the blue tips come along and eat them. So I wouldn't, normally if you just sit still and don't do anything, it will sort itself out. If the tree is reasonably healthy, I would just not panic too much.
If I showed you a picture, would you be able to tell us? Would you know of what it is? I don't know if you would. Can you see that image?
Definitely, yeah. It's definitely a caterpillar, very handsome caterpillar.
Yeah, that's what attracted us, was all these bright colours, and there was about 5 of them on this one tree, so I had to start doing a wee bit of research, and I did read that about the soapy water, so I've got a wee recipe for it, so we'll give that a bash and see if that helps.
It looks a bit like a sawfly. It's hard to tell from the thing. It looks gooseberry sawfly, when they've eaten all the gooseberries, sometimes go and have a chew with other things. But I don't immediately recognise it. Does anyone else from the picture? No. No. I would if it's only five of the caterpillars, you could always just pick them off with your fingers. It's not, yeah. There's a good phrase which which is that slightly cheesy, but that going and looking at trees or going and looking at plants, the idea, what's the phrase about the best fertilizer being the gardener's shadow, going and having a look at things and thinking something's wrong and just fixing it isn't a bad thing. So if you're worried about aphids or caterpillars or something, you can always just pick them off with your fingers or squish them. I'm not sure if squishing them is very, very, I think it's organic. Yeah. But keeping an eye on things so they don't get out of hand. Any more questions?
Thanks, John. That was fascinating, that talk. It's reminded me of the work that you do and the variety of trees that are out there. I think for anyone that's interested, we've got John's email address and the web address is there as well. John obviously will be supplying fruit trees quite soon, John. And I would recommend, if you are thinking of getting any trees or shrubs from John, to order them quite quickly, because I know they go very quickly, especially the more unusual varieties. You're better to get your order in really quickly. So if you're keen to follow up tonight's session, I would definitely recommend you contacting John quite soon in order to get your selected varieties.
We are taking orders now for the winter. We basically send out the trees from sort of late November onward, but we are taking orders now. So if you are looking for trees, then you don't have to wait till then.
I'm wondering if you take orders for your Clyde cider as well, John. Is that
Yes, I do that. I have to say, the Clyde cider seems to be more of a sort of business card with my name on it, really. I'm not decided. I quite enjoy making the cider, and it's a nice thing to do. But the booze industry is quite a different industry from selling fruit trees, and so a lot of it seems to just get handed out as as a reward for planting trees, or as a way of just sort of getting people interested. So there are quite a number of people actually starting to make cider in Scotland again. It's quite, both on a small scale, but there are a few people producing quite seriously, which is fun as well. It's and again, it's all building up the skills and the knowledge again, which I think cider making always was part of the mix of fruit growing, because it's a way of preserving fruit. Yeah.
Well, I think that ties in quite nicely, John, because I know Enid and I we're trying to organise a volunteering day, and many of you will know about it, But in case you don't know about it, we're going to be doing some CRT and Glyn volunteering at Wimpy Park in Alloa. Wimpy Park are a community garden based in Alloa, and they're getting a Beech Grove makeover for a whole week. Beech Grove are going to be there helping them to plant up their community garden, and we thought, what a great idea, why don't we get involved? So we would love to get our CRT and our Glyn groups over there towards the end of the month. It's going to be the month of the week beginning Monday the 23rd of August. And I think the dates that are probably the most likely will be the Thursday, Enid. I was speaking to the designer today, and the trees I think are going to be planted on the Thursday of that week. So we're trying to establish a core group of us to go. Hopefully we can get John along as well. We'd like John to do a masterclass as well. But there will be an opportunity for us to go and volunteer. It'll be a good way of promoting your particular projects, learn new skills, meet other community gardeners, and see what's going on at Wimpy Park, and maybe getting a bit of coverage on Beech Grove as well. Can't guarantee that, but Ina's going to guarantee some t-shirts, which is great.
Yes, just in case we end up on the telly, we will have some logos on t-shirts for everyone. So I'm thinking of getting large and extra large size, because probably people will just pull them over the top of what they're wearing. So if anyone wants a different size from that that's planning to join us, just let me know. But I'm going to get t-shirts made up. So if anyone does want to help out, it would be good to know numbers, because Finlay Robertson, who's the chair of the group that's worked really hard to get the garden to this stage, and he's absolutely over the moon that the BBC, the Beech Grove Garden are coming. It's completely out of the blue. They've got very short notice, and they're working 24 hours a day trying to pull it all together, because basically the BBC give them £5,000 and they send the cameras in, but other than that, the group themselves have got to pull everything together. So CRT have agreed to fund buying things like trees and session work, and to help out, but we do need sort of volunteer bodies as well. And we thought a way of promoting the Glyn Award, and as Jean was saying, if any groups, because we've no idea how it might go. People might get a little interview, they might not. We just don't know how it's going to go. But fortunately, I think Jean knows the lady who's the garden designer. Is that right?
Yeah, I was chatting to her today, and it's a girl called Lynn Harris, and some of you might have come across her from Lynn Hill. Sorry, I get there's two with Lynn Hill. She used to do, you might have seen some of her designs at Garden in Scotland. So she was saying that we should contact actually Turn TV. They're putting together the volunteer list, so I'll do that tomorrow. We'll probably need names and numbers quite soon, so that we're down there as volunteers. And then we can coordinate hopefully a masterclass or a planting opportunity with John as well. They're keen to have that happen. So yeah, it could change though, Enid. Like all these things, they're having what does she call it? She called it something like it's like a last minute planning meeting on Thursday. Of this week, yeah, just to confirm their timetable of when they're going to be doing things. But she did indicate that the Thursday afternoon, that certainly the Thursday would be a good day for us to be planting trees, and it also gives us the opportunity to plant up some of the other beds as well. So it would just be a lovely day out, I think. I'm certainly looking forward to it. Enid, is there travel expenses, or is that?
Travel expenses, if anyone wants to come. Pamela kindly went to the planning meeting earlier on last week, wasn't it? Do you want to get a bit of feedback on the vibe that was going on at the garden, Pam? You need to put you're muted.
It was mayhem, I would describe it as, because I hadn't realised that they'd only had a couple of weeks notice to get it all together. My head was exploding by the end of it at what the scale of what they're trying to do, and to get it all ready for the cameras and so on. Yeah, it's a massive amount of work.
So they're really looking for as many pairs of hands as possible to help out.
I think so, yeah. And I see they have sent out a bit of a schedule, haven't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it looks like Thursday and Friday are the two most potential days that would suit the type of work that we're offering in the way of planting trees.
Yeah.
So, John, would you be free either of those days to come and help? You're still on mute.
Yes, if you check in with me, I'll check my diary, but yes, I should be able to. Yeah, I think I checked the Thursday and it was looking okay. So I think
that would be good. That would be excellent.
But if you could double check with me and I'll get it in.
So does anyone that's here want to think that they might be able to come along and help for?
So Thursday the 26th.
26th, yeah, 26th of August.
Yeah.
No idea of timings or whatever as yet, but I mean any time that you can give would be helpful.
I wouldn't be able to get there before the afternoon, I think.
Okay, so
I'm going to Edinburgh in the morning.
Right.
Yeah.
And do you think anyone else from Grow West Fife might be able to help out?
I'll ask around. Yeah.
Okay.
Some work commitments might be against us because we're doing a lot of stuff on the garden in Mayfield, and we've got the schools coming in next week, so it's going to be tough to get away, to be honest. But
I know, and you're not exactly next door, Phil. You're a wee while away.
I know, but good luck anyway.
Yeah, thank you. So if you do find you've got a bit of free time, just drop me a line and we'll put you in the mix.
Yeah. Great. So once again, I'd just like to thank John one more time. Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Fantastic chat tonight. Really enjoyed it. Check out John's website. Great if you're looking for some training, and if you can come along to the Wimpy Park event, you'll hopefully see John there as well. So on behalf of CRT and Glyn, thank you very much, John. Really great chat. So I think the next masterclass we've got is on Wednesday the 29th of September, and we have Greg Knisher from Royal Botanic Gardens talking about Scottish plant lore. We've also got we'll have our CRT catch-up sessions, which was due to happen on Wednesday the 25th. But I think if we're going to be at Wimpy Park, Ian, we'll maybe postpone that to maybe the following week.
Yeah.
Which maybe be the first Wednesday, the 1st of September. So that's the opportunity for you to come together, share what you've been up to, all your hints and tips in terms of Glyn Award. I think sharing your video, Phil, would be a nice opportunity that night, and it's just a way for us all to network again. So on behalf of Enid and I and everybody, thanks a lot, John, for tonight's session, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yep, thanks very much, John. That was
Thanks,
great.
John.
And thanks everyone for joining us. It's been a wee bit of a longer session, but I think it was worth it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.